Hi guys, welcome to the webinar. This is AI and Agri-Tech webinar by AWS and T-Hub. Before we begin, some basic hygiene rule. All the attendees are on mute. If you have a question, please post it in the chat window. We will pick up those questions and moderator will ensure that the questions are being answered by the panelists. The webinar is for 1 hour 15 minutes, which includes the Q&A towards the end of the webinar. The entire webinar is divided into two parts. We'll have Mr. Ajay call for the keynote, and then we'll get into the panel discussion around opportunities in in AI and agri-tech sector. Before we without further ado, I will just introduce Mr. Ajay Kaul, who is part of the AWS business, and he leads the state and local government businesses in India. He has 20 plus years of experience in multiple sectors in the IT industry. Already played a pivotal role in the technology adoption across public sector, education, and health tech domains. He has always been strategic guidance. He's provided strategic guidance to help customers achieve scale, agile, secure, and highly optimized solutions. So I'll invite Mr. Ajay Kaul to take over the mic and provide his point of views towards this topic. Ajay, over to you.
Thank you, Shivam. Thank you for the nice intro. And good morning, everyone. It's absolute pleasure to be here on this call today. Before I begin, I just wanted to congratulate T-Hub for enabling and empowering an agile and value-based startup ecosystem, that's focused on driving innovation and really impacting citizen lives in one way or the other. So really, congratulations for all the work that you are doing. And with today's topic of leveraging AI for agri-tech, I think it's more suited, as agriculture um, is kind of in a second phase or the next phase of a revolution, and the AI intervention is definitely helping it move big time in that direction. And even in times ahead, this will definitely continue to play a very, very larger role. And as we know, factors such as climate change, population growth, and food security concerns have propelled the industry into seeking more innovative approaches to protecting and improving crop yield and so on and so forth. Be it the crop and soil monitoring or predictive analysis, I think AI is steadily emerging as part of the industry's technological evolution. And with the integration of new technologies such as AI, IoT, data analysis, remote sensing, agri-tech startups are offering immediate solutions in streamlining the supply process and also helping the farmers to produce more effectively. AI-based apps are helping for predicting weather conditions and determining the right time to sow seeds. I think that is really helping farmers significantly, and ensuring that there's a consistent growth and there's a minimum wastage because of a lot of areas that have been taken care of on the demand supply front, on the storage front, and so on and so forth. So all this has been possible by intervention of technologies like AI. And over the past few years, we've seen this intervention only getting stronger. Now, many of the startups in agri space use Earth on AWS, right, and satellite images from NASA and ESA, by the way, which are also data registry free of cost. But there has been a humongous opportunity being unveiled by a lot of startups in this domain. And one of the opportunities or the use case I want to talk about is with SatSure. They leverage AWS to combine satellite imagery, machine learning algorithms, drone imagery, and data sets to generate near real-time location-specific insights. And that came very, very handy in one of the, I would say, concerns that hit a state very recently. SatSure's analysis of satellite data helped AP government assess crop damage, settle farmer insurance claims in the record time. And this was, I'm sure some of you would recall when tropical cyclone Titli hit eastern coast in October 2018. It hit farmers very, very badly. And as we know, once the cyclone hits and then fields are submerged with water everywhere, it becomes near impossible to figure out what the damage actually is and who are the real beneficiaries and the ones who are not. So that kind of became a big problem statement and also led to an issue on the settlement of insurance, not to speak of other help that governments could render to the farmers, even though they definitely wanted to do so. um, so at that moment of time, I think what Sature did was, they helped farmers in Srikakulam district of AP, where they suffered extensive damages. So the government roped in Satshore, which is again, like I said, decision intelligence platform to provide satellite-based crop monitoring services to enable efficient crop insurance claim settlement. Now, there was the imagery that they pulled down from the satellites, which was before the cyclone hit, and in the post images of the way the cyclone was impacted. So that helped them to kind of get a clear assessment of what the real scenario on ground was, and and I'm happy to share that they kind of settled the insurance claims in a record of 30 days. I mean, it's unheard of in an industry which all of us know, one, gets deeply impacted. Two, there is no way for a farmer to substantiate their claims of how much losses have been incurred. And imagine the kind of impact Sature did, along with government of AP, to every single farmer, who had these claims as basic means of their livelihood. And not to speak about the overall loss that happened to the state by way of the cyclone impact. But I think this was one use case, and like that there could be many more. Um, and not only that, as soon as the cyclone alert was sounded, Satshore analysts accessed and analyzed satellite images using the registry of open data source from Amazon Web Services. Within 3 days, they delivered insights about areas under cultivation and areas inundated. And that's where it's a combination of an intent to harness technology in the right way, and that's where this collaboration and the joint effort between AWS and Satshore did a meaningful job for government of AP and the farmers. And just to let you know, there was Amazon Aurora, there was EC2 instances that were, leveraged to put this whole thing together, because this needs a huge quantum of computing, multiple facets of data at a very, very short span of time. In addition to that, I think, like I said, AI today is also helping solve the wastage problem big time. As we know that there, especially in these COVID times, a lot of farmers have not been able to know where the actual storage spaces are. And by virtue of the technology intervention, it has been very, very helpful for farmers to know what are the nearest locations, cold storages, areas where they can actually get their harvests being taken care of so that they don't get wasted. Now, as a country, farming, agriculture is extremely crucial, extremely critical to us. It actually impacts the economy of the country as well. And any intervention that happens on this front has a very, very large impact. So with AWS, you can actually focus on building apps and deliver services, to accomplish your mission, while we take care of the rest of the things from the technology standpoint. And with regard to that, we help various startups in business to government space by few things, which might come very, very handy and acts as a very good booster or a catalyst to initiate such interventions on the field. One is that we activate program with the startups with initial credits provided by AWS to get them their solution off the ground, because from day one every startup won't be able to hit the roof. So they need some level of a basic infra where they can port the applications, they can create the solutions, architect it, test it, experiment it, and then keep on refining it for a period of time. So that's where AWS initial credit support helps them big time. The second is we also provide technical enablement through various trainings, including the architectural reviews, etc., where we have best practices that we share with them to refine the solutions that they have to make it a lot more, adoptable, a lot more viable, when it hits the ground. Third is we also support them with go-to-market support by connecting them with customers across the board, because we work with most of the customers in this space at a central level, at a state level. So that leeway can be leveraged by the startups to become a lot more networked with the industry and the desired people across the country and the states. We also help them push through bigger, larger system integrators, because end of the day we know that uh, while startups solutions can be good, but it can't stop at that. There will be a requirement of a bigger, larger system integrators to put the whole stack together, to put the whole solution together. So that's where we kind of push them on that side as well. And last but not the least, I think there is a local and global visibility through be it PR exercise, be it introducing to our bigger, larger people within AWS, and to the customers, not only restricted to India, but outside India as well, because farming, as we know, has been an area of concern for various countries, and they have successfully deployed various technology models to get things a lot more efficient and better. Be it Japan for that matter, or be that US for that matter. So as we know, technology knows no boundaries. So that's where AWS can help provide that global viewpoint to the startups as well, so that it becomes a lot more um, a solution where we don't replicate the issues that have been encountered by somebody else somewhere as well, and we can a lot more focus on driving solutions to the betterment of the farmers and the overall efficiency of better crop yields. So that's all I had to talk about this morning, but I think this is just the beginning, and there are a lot many areas that can get covered as we progress through this approach. There's a lot that we can do together, and more than happy to take the discussions forward. We have Dipti, who's already part of the panel during the day, but we can be more than happy to engage further and take these discussions forward. With that, let me once again congratulate T-Hub for putting this whole quorum together. This is definitely going to impact the country's economy in today's times and in near future as well. So all the very best. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for that, Ajay. Guys, as Ajay was talking about the architecture reviews, GTM support, and all of the AWS startup programs that we have, please feel free to reach out to us. We'll be more than happy to explore synergies with you in terms of architecture reviews, going deeper into your use cases, brainstorming with you in terms of what you're trying to build, and also exploring GTM support. You will receive an email from T-Hub post the webinar with our coordinates in that. So feel free to respond back on that email or reply back to us directly. Now, moving into the panel, I would like to introduce Deepti Dutt, who is the moderator for the panel today and is part of the AWS team. She heads the strategic initiatives for the public sector team. With 20 plus of years of experience, Deepti currently focuses on areas like smart infrastructure, digital agriculture, GovStart program, and she's been with AWS for almost 2.5 years now, right? So prior to this, Deepti was leading initiatives at Microsoft and IBM, which was related to smart cities. Now I'll invite Deepti to introduce the panel and take the discussion forward. Thank you, Deepti.
Thanks, Tom, for the intro, and thanks, Ajay, for the nice keynote. Welcome to all the panelists. I have a very interesting and diverse panel here, all related to agriculture and yet very different perspective. So I have an incubator, ICRISAT, represented by Ram, that specializes in nurturing only agriculture-based startups. And then I have a VC Omnivore, represented by Jinesh, which works primarily in food and agriculture related startups. And then I have three diverse set of startups, Unmiti, Kalgudi, and Kuza. There are two things common about about all the three startups. So one obviously is that all three of them are incubated by RAM. They are incubated at ICRISAT. So Ram becomes Sutradhar for all of them. Another interesting fun fact about all the three incubators is their name itself. Okay, so Unmiti, and they're very diverse names and diverse meanings. So Unmiti, it's a Sanskrit word which means measurement. Okay, they are using AI and other frontier technology for impact assessment of various government projects. Then we have Raj from Kalgudi. Kalgudi is a Kannada word which means stone temple. Kalgudi is also name of a village, pretty much like Malgudi, so that it's easy for us to remember Malgudi days times. You know, those of us who are old enough to remember Malgudi days. So yeah, so and you know the why Raj and his team chose the name Kalgudi was because the entire idea was conceived in a village called Kalgudi. So you can imagine how deep rural roots their solution would have. And then we have Bharti from Kuza. So Kuza is a Swahili word which means to grow. And that's precisely what they do. They help small farmers and rural youth grow their own businesses, and they have this concept of agripreneurs. Uh, yeah, and you know, as Ajay had mentioned that we work with our startups and take them global. You know, Bharti is already working in Kenya and in India, and we also see a lot of demand for India-based agri solutions in South Asian countries like Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, etc. Right? Because they realize that you know India is closer to their geographical and other needs than say Australia or America, or those both demographic smallholding farmers and the kind of agriculture practices and climatic conditions. So India is a lot more closer to those countries as compared to Australia or the US, right? So yes, so we have a lot of demand for India-based, agriculture startups in a lot of the South Asian countries and African countries. So with that introduction, let me get started, and invite the panelists to share their views. Jinesh, if I may start with you, you know, uh, what trends do you see in tech adoption in agri space? You know, as a VC, you'd be talking to lots of startups, some that you already fund, some potential. So how do you see adoption of digital agriculture? So one question is, what trends are you seeing tech adoption in agri space? And second is, how do you see adoption of digital agriculture solutions by government?
Sure. I mean, let me ask the first question. That's easier because government is something which is always something that's out of control. So, I mean, broadly, I mean, there are few trends which are really shaping up right now, right? I mean, on a macro or a broad thing, digitization of agriculture is happening for sure. And it's not that any one peer is responsible for that. I think it was a need of the hour, right? I mean, farmers who were not willing to come on applications or digital agriculture, uh, they would come once in a while, ask some questions. As soon as the season is over, they would throw down the app or uninstall the app and come back whenever there is a need, right? It was need basis that farmer used to do that, and it was also dependent once in a while the push from the startups or from the companies that farmers used to come. There was a lot of incentives or support given, but in the last 5 months, I think the COVID scenario, the digitization has become a real trend, right? It's now a pull by the farmers. I think startups don't have to now push for digitization or ask them to install the app. Farmers were unable to reach to sell the products to the markets, and the supply, because the supply chain was broken, right? And that was precisely a need. The farmers realized, okay, I need to do something about selling my produce, otherwise I'm going to be dead, right? And so in the last 5 months, we've seen more digitization happening in the agri sector than thought in the last 5 years. What we thought in the next 5 years is going to happen has happened in the last 5 months. So digitization of agriculture, about farmer willing to talk to startup, farmer willing to talk to middlemen, anyone who is willing to buy his produce is great, right? At the same time, when he was trying to buy the inputs from the companies, the seeds or anything, I think he was not sure how he's going to get it, right? So he started reaching out to input dealers and say, guys, I want this, and that's also pushed up. So in the last 5 months, digitization has really increased. Uh, the second trend, what we have seen in the last few years, uh, the market connect. I mean, with government coming out of the new regulations where trade outside of APMC is now not illegal. I mean, agriculture anyway is at 35 to 40% of trade happening outside the APMC's market. Whether it was legal, illegal, I'm not debating to that. And no government, whether state or central, was willing to do anything because they didn't want to prevent farmers, because farmers are the vote banks. So the market connect was happening. It had started out in the horticulture segment for sure. It was happening in other segments as well, except the rice and wheat or the products which had MSP supports. But now, in the last few months and maybe the last couple of years, we are seeing market connection is becoming a significant trend. Farmers are asking to everyone, saying, how do I get paid more for what I'm doing, right? I mean, they're not asking for any other support. They're not asking anyone to tell how they don't want guidance about how should they grow their produce or not, right? They're trying to figure out what's the best price they can get, and that is a significant important trend, because that is the holy grail how agriculture is going to move, right? It's like asking an employee, saying whether you want a reduced cost structures of a company not paying you enough salary but company taking care of the cost, or without is saying that I'll pay you higher increment in your salaries and you take care of everything. I mean, farmers also wanted the second option, saying I want a higher price of what am I doing, and I'm willing to pay the market cost for growing my produce. So that's the second trend which you are seeing. The third, which is a consumer-led trend, which is very important. I mean, India is moving from a grain-based dietary economy to a protein-based dietary economy. We are seeing more and more consumption happening in protein. That's enough story for them. But we're also seeing more and more demand for processed food what we perceive it to be healthy, food what we think is going to give better nutrition value to everyone, including the family members. So consumers are asking for better nutrition in terms of what they are eating, and that is how farmers are responding. I mean, because as and when the customers will demand that I want a higher nutrition food, farmers will respond to that. And another thing which is really happening, also a consumption-led trend, is traceability. I mean, we have heard enough horror stories about the food not being pure, or food not being not sure what are the ingredients. We have heard enough stories about milk contamination. We heard enough stories about every food contamination potentially wherever we can eat, right? And the customers are now asking that I want to know what is the source where my food is coming. What is the farmer putting in the food, or what is the input in the same? How is the supply chain happening? How is it reaching to my place? And what am I eating? Is it safe or not, right? And he is willing to pay for both getting a traceability information. He is willing to look at his app, do a QR code and say, where do I get the information? And he's willing to pay for higher nutrition value. And if the customer is willing to pay more money to whatever he needs, I think there is always enough push across the supply chain, and that we are seeing that early trends of traceability, early trends of nutritious food getting available to the consumers. It's not that farmer didn't do it. I mean, it was because in the past customers didn't bother, right? We Indians never used to bother what the heck we ate, right? We said jo mila kha liya. And at least in the last 1-2 years, and I think after the COVID scenario, when we got our health scare of our life, yeah, so we are all going to look for traceability, look for nutritious food. And I think this is going to become a bigger trend than even the market connects, because whatever consumer will ask, the producers will supply. These are the four broad trends I'm seeing. Overall, we are seeing precision agriculture, drone-based or robotic-based, but those are means to the end. It's not the end in itself, right? Because ultimately it has to tie up what the production is doing and what the consumption is supposed to happen. And that's what the broad trends I'm seeing as a VC right now.
Great, Jinesh. So you highlighted three things: digitization across value chain, market linkages, and consumption-led supply chain, be it traceability or nutrition value. And I think later on we'll have Raj talk about some of these things, because its solution kind of ties up all these things together. Since you're in the trend, Ram, let me come to you.
Sure.
I have at the Center of Innovation and Startup Solution in Agri-Space. While Jinesh talked about as business use cases what he's seeing as trend, can you share insights on how some of your startups are leveraging AI as part of their solution, and what ground problems are being solved using technology and AI?
Sure. Thanks, Deepti. Firstly, thank you for this opportunity. Just for the ease of communication, I can hear a small echo, perhaps. Yeah, so let me just divide this into some logical parts so that will kind of help us understand where all AI, firstly, I think Jinesh touched upon the importance of digitization, right? Firstly, digitization, and then AI kind of follows that. One is in pre-season planning, like, today, the Indian Meteorological Department and the Indian Institute of Tropical Meteorology, they issue something called as a seasonal forecast, right? Including one of Omnivore's investee, SkyMet also, they do something called a seasonal forecasting, right? This kind of, and in the month of April for India, they kind of come up with a forecast as to how the season will pan out, right? Now, there are some scientific tools like, crop simulation modeling, or, some agronomy or some crop sciences that can be combined with some of these seasonal forecasts, and then you can kind of advise the farmer that how the season will pan out, and what is the kind of crop portfolio that they can probably grow, right? So this is one of those earliest areas where um, you know AI is actually helping farmers in terms of decision support, in terms of pre-seasonal planning, right? I'm also kind of foresee a situation that going forward, along with the seasonal forecast, we might, if our futures market is so powerful, you can start feeding in how the likely price of a commodity is there, and all this can actually come up with a recommendation to the farmer as to which crop will be economically most optimal, right? This kind of slightly futuristic. Maybe we'll get there sometime. uh, Moving on from pre-seasonal planning, there's a lot of use of AI and ML in seasonal crop management. Like, I'm sure most of you have heard of this app called Plantix, which uses computer vision and machine learning to basically provide pest and disease diagnostics to farmers, right? Or you have one of Omnivore's investee company again called Fussel, where they're using some IoT sensors, and based on hyper-local climate, and using some forecasts, they are actually giving very actionable advisories to farmers so that farmers can better manage their crops and thereby minimize crop damages, right? Or probably you're also seeing the early advent of some startups that are, automating the irrigation management processes. Again, there are some startups that are using some sensors, measuring some moisture in the field, in situ soil measurement, and then combining that with some algorithms and triggering some irrigation management, etc., right? Or for that matter, there is also a lot of drone-based crop diagnostics and crop spraying that is kind of coming into into action. This drone-based crop spraying became a little popular, especially during COVID times, because a lot of these local labor markets from where farmers used to hire temporary labor for undertaking pesticide spraying activities, those markets disappeared. So there were some clusters where there are a lot of these drone-based startups that were actually helping out farmers with spraying and other activities, right? So broadly, as far as the advisories are concerned, pre-season planning and in-season crop management, these were two broad areas where AI seems to be making some big impact. Coming to value chain services, I think there is a lot of activity of use of AI and a lot of digitalization that's happening, especially in the value chain space. One is, of course, I think Ajay Kaul touched about SatSure. Broadly, SatSure is kind of filling in a very critical gap around financial inclusion in Indian agriculture. If I were to characterize finance in Indian agriculture, it broadly has two pillars. One is credit, institutional credit, which is offered by banks or other financial institutions. Other is, of course, crop insurance. So someone like a SatSure is kind of providing some information products both to banks as well as crop insurance companies and filling in a very critical gap. Apart from finance, I think market linkages, there are plenty of examples. You have, an example like Kalgudi, which is, if I remember right, Raj once told me he uses about 17 machine learning methods that run underneath the platform to enable a lot of value chain linkages, a lot of market linkages. Or I can recollect an example again, Omnivore's investee company called Farmly, where they use machine learning algorithms to arrive at a price, that is rolled out to farmers, right? So broadly speaking, as I think Jinesh also touched upon it, the penetration of AI into agriculture is happening all across the value chain. You can't single out any specific area, although there seems to be some concentration in the value chain space. And at the same time, not most of these products that rolled out by these startups, farmers need not be the end consumer. A lot of times, they kind of are offering products to a lot of SMEs, to a lot of businesses, right? And once these businesses are actually, able to extract some economic value courtesy some of these advanced tools, I'm sure at a systemic level there will be an economic surplus that will get generated, right? And if the government policies are aligned well enough, we can create a situation where some of these economic surpluses can be transferred back to farmers as well. So indirectly also, a lot of farmers will benefit through more digitalization and more use of machine learning in agriculture. So I'll kind of pause there.
Thanks, Ram. That was like very valuable, how on a larger, broader perspective, how do you see it all shaping up? I'll come back to you later on,
Sure.
since you talked about systemic adoption of the solutions. So I'll come back to you later on some more questions around the systemic adoption of things. But now let me move to, the specific solution that our startups on the panel are solving. So Bharti, through Kuza, you are solving two critical problems being faced by rural economies when it comes to adoption of tech solutions, right? One is the inability, the most vulnerable are the small farmers that we really want to reach out to. And they are the ones who are, it's most difficult for them to adopt technology, either because they don't have access to smartphones or they are not tech savvy enough to use smartphones and technology, right? So that's one problem that we have on how do we really take technology at scale to the small farmers. Second big problem that our rural economies is facing is unemployment amongst rural youth, right? So can you talk about how you are solving both these problems together?
Yeah, sure, Deepti. So I think the fundamental premise on which we started off this whole initiative is as a social technology enterprise, we've been working with a lot of communities and smallholder farmers being one of them. And the biggest challenge that we identified in the rural economy is twofold, as you rightly put it. Is one is the rural unemployment, especially with the migration and the reverse migration happening. The rural youth still remain to be very vulnerable if we do not solve the unemployment issue. On the other hand, there are this set of farmers, smallholder farmers, who probably do not have access to a lot of information technology and a lot of things that the world is moving towards, and they do not have access to some of the basic things like access to the right inputs, maybe the credit, market information, and most importantly the advisory. And that is where Kuza's whole model is into tapping the potential of the rural youth to be able to solve some of the systemic challenges that we have in the rural microeconomies. So what we do is we handpick youth, put them through an incubation process, and we build them as a new cadre of private sector frontline extension workers so that they could work with the farmers to be able to bring some of these technologies that we are talking about, and they are in a position to better use it. Again, one of the innovation that we've brought in is towards the micro distribution, which, as you rightly said, there is a lot of smallholder farmers do not have access to smartphones, and they are not so technology savvy that they will be able to adapt some of these technologies. So the rural youth whom we set up as the agripreneurs are the ones who are now making sure that the farmers are able to access any of these services and the technology that we bring in. And they provide the extension services and the advisory services through the distribution platform that we have created at Kuza.
Great, Bharti, for sharing those. I'm assuming that the platform that you are creating, it's also going to enable farmers or the rural economy, not just from agriculture best practices perspective, but probably that can also be, one can also build up upon those platforms to be it educate people better on, say, financial inclusion or healthcare practices, or send your girl child to school and those kind of campaigns, right? So I'm sure in future, as you scale up your platform, your solution can also be leveraged for many of solving many of those societal issues as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And with that, Praveen, let me come to you. Since we're talking about solving a lot of societal issues and and having these large-scale programs, one of the most difficult thing for any large-scale program is how do you measure impact of a program? Everyone wants to do it, a desirable aspect, but it's been, if I may use the word, it's been more of an enigma. A very clear thought process is required on what impact is, what outcome is. Outflow versus outcome are two very different things, right? So what that really means, and then building a measurement system around it. So please can you share with us what you're doing in this space, how you are doing this, and what results you have seen so far?
Sure, sure. First of all, thank you, thanks Riti, and thanks T-Hub for the opportunity. So yeah, when you say Enigma, I will kind of agree with you. Like it was kind of a mystery. Like how do you calculate the impact? So that's where we saw the white space, and we thought like there should be a solution. Like there should be a simple solution which can track or measure the impact. So I mean, I will give you a little background of how it all started. Like it's like a last couple of years, we have been working with ICRISAT digital agriculture team, which is led by Ram Dilipala, who happens to be our panelist today. So we were working on different scale of projects. Like in some of them, the impact is like you have to measure the end beneficiary impact, like how much impact are you making on the end beneficiary. And some of the impacts you want to measure are on the outputs or the impact of the program level. So when we are building different solutions, like for different projects, then we identified that there is a scope for a single unified product where it can measure the impact of the complete project by dividing them into different set of indicators, and then again combining them to the output and outcome level. So we developed a kind of a framework like which will analyze at each level like how the impact of it is on the output, and when it comes to outcome, how it is. There can be short-term outcomes or there can be long-term outcomes. So depending on the indicators you said, you can calculate the impact you're getting. Of course, there are some spaces where you have more of the qualitative data compared to the quantitative data. That's where the challenge arises, and that's, I mean, there is a solution we are trying to think of, but the quantitative is an easier side now compared to some years back. Like you can just quantitatively measure the impact of the project on the ground. So that's where the idea came in, and we built a product. We built a single product called MPro. So where with this we are measuring the, I mean, 7 different projects across 12 nations, 12 countries. And in India, we implemented that in the Odisha Livelihood Missions, which is a government-based project. So which is a diverse project implemented by different NGOs, different partners. So they are using a single app, single tool, and they're collecting the data. And once the data is collected, we are kind of giving the impact of like what the data is giving. So our analytics and our insights are giving the information or the impact of the project to the project owners. Yeah, so although it's an enigma, there are solutions, and solutions can be built easily. Yeah. Thank you.
So do you just want to elaborate on how you're leveraging technology to do that? You know, if you just want to add that to
Yeah,
your response.
so yes, sure. So our application is both a web and mobile application. So we have a mobile app which works offline for the data collection. And what we are doing, apart from the standard data collection and analytics and insights, we are also using the secondary data sets available, like the weather data from the AWare. So we are using that to compare with the particular plot, and giving the analysis of what is the forecast of it, and what's the 10-day weather before the sowing and 10-day weather after the sowing, so that it can help them next year to assess like when to do that, when to do the sowing, and when to do the harvesting. So we are using the secondary data sets also now, apart from the standard data collection tools data we are getting. So the solutions we are using, the mobile app which works offline and online, which works in the rural remote areas too. Yeah.
Thanks, Praveen, for that. And Raj, before I come to you, I would just request the audience, you know, if you have any questions, please feel free to type them in the chat window in the question section. You know, after the panel discussion, we'll be happy to take some questions from you. Raj, let me come to you. You know, at Kalgoody, you're building a digital convergence platform that brings together all stakeholders in value chain. Inputs needed by farmer, output management by farmer. In fact, you know, Jinesh just talked about whatever that he talked about in the key trends, digitalization across value chain, market linkages. You seem to be doing all of that. Can you share with us how Kalgoody uses AI-based aggregations to connect farmers and micro entrepreneurs to the right stakeholders?
Sure, Dipti. Thank you for having me here in the first place. I'm not going to probably repeat.
Raj, your voice is faint.
Is this any better?
Perfect. Yeah.
Okay, maybe I should hold my microphone. So I'm trying to avoid the great thoughts already expressed by Jinesh, Ram, and other panelists. Our focus in Kalgudi is more on mundane issues that are crippling the ecosystem at scale. Particularly they surface when we are trying to connect stakeholders on mutually beneficial interactions. Kalgudi is a network of agriculture ecosystem, like a LinkedIn for food. In this, we have farmers, scientists. In fact, Ram is also there. Universities, input and output players, all interconnected. Physical domain interactions are actually modeled into digital interactions through our intelligent marketplaces. Now I'll talk about 3 interesting problems that we faced and solved in knowledge management and in inputs and output marketplaces. I'll go a little deeper into the problem, particularly like why it is important and how we solved it also a little bit more. Okay. So as part of the knowledge management, many agri universities and scientists have actually signed up to answer farmers' questions. Farmer asking a question and a scientist answering it. Sounds very simple, right? But this simple scenario actually throws a very interesting problem at scale. We have fewer scientists and large number of farmers. And the majority of the questions are near duplicates. Probably not in exact terms, but if you consider the latent information in them, they are duplicates. And pushing all these questions to the scientists, and very quickly it becomes like troublesome for them to answer these many questions. So we try to club these duplicates before reaching out to scientists. Basically, we get these questions in pipeline, hundreds and thousands of them, and we try to extract the intent of the farmer from the question. And of course, we experimented with many techniques like supervised, unsupervised learning techniques. And basically, what worked for us, which is in use currently, is kernel-based rephrasing. Essentially like extracting the latent information and building the knowledge graphs and classifying the incoming question, and then push to the scientist. What's happening there is like the scientists are now seeing a lot lesser questions than like bombarded with the many duplicates all the time. Not only that, we take it further to see that just remember that like there are hundreds of farmers who are not asking any question for every question that has been asked. So we analyze this the question to see like who else would be interested, and push it as like you might be interested kind of thing. And this is actually helping that like farmers engaging and using the app more and more. And this is probably one example where we are using the AI and ML in production support systems, as part of our core agri services. Our input marketplace actually connects farmers with many input suppliers. But normal e-commerce interactions in agri domain is not working as expected. Particularly like farmers generally do not go and browse the marketplace and order a product. They generally look at like the symptoms rather than brand names. And even if they did order some product, the needs are so small that the suppliers mostly not interested, or the optimization cannot happen. So we try to solve this. I mean, every one of us know that like aggregation is the demand aggregation is the big probably like something that can solve here. We try to solve it by anticipating and aggregating the demand and connecting with the suppliers in our marketplace. It's probably straightforward in terms of like using multivariable regression algorithms, using like understanding what our understanding about the farmer in terms of like the location and the crop, and like using the crop calendars and all these things used. In fact we explored a simple rule-based approach before, but like there is huge randomness, particularly because of lack of standards and the diversity, and that gave very poor results. But with regression, like we are able to like we get very good results. And this effort like of aggregation using AI and connecting with the suppliers, and we are seeing a very good minimum 30%, in fact I should say, the cost advantage to the farmers, not just in the cost, but like when they also get good quality inputs, particularly because we procure them from reputed suppliers. And also the time in terms of like how they get is what's we're able to achieve in inputs. The last problem I probably want to talk about is an interesting one in output marketplace. Jinesh touched on it, like, how, every farmer would want to, like, optimize or, like, increase their share in the market. But the challenges are very interesting in the agriculture domain. Now, assume that, like, we have a buyer in our output marketplace. Kalgudi has output marketplace as well, as they're looking for 100 tons of Banganpalli mango, with certain parameters. Maybe like they would want to export it to UK, where vapor treatment has to be done and that kind of stuff. Now, on the other side, we have, let's say, 10,000 Banganpalli mango farmers in Kalgudi, for whom probably we already anticipated the supply using, again, some kind of regression. And we know where they are, and parameters in terms of what variety and what stage of the crop and when the crop is going to come. Now, that's also simple. But now the problem is how quickly and how do we shortlist, or, like, the farmers who are the best match for this 100 tons Banganpalli mango, right? Without that, the buyer is quickly going to lose interest in this marketplace of 10,000 Banganpalli mangoes, and one selling 1 ton, 10 tons, 20 tons, and, like, don't understand the parameters. It's a gigantic effort for them. So they quickly go back to their traditional channels of, like, the traders and the intermediaries kind of stuff. So we wanted to solve it. So we experimented a lot on this. Initially it looked like a linear programming issue. So, but that did not work. But then we followed by, like, decision tree with cascading optimizations kind of stuff. It worked a little bit, but it was too slow, because the buyer would want to quickly see, hey, show me the 50 farmers or 100 farmers that match this. I mean, there was enough randomness in this, because, like, every need was different, and every, the language was different, and the standards were different, and enough randomness was there, and also needed speed. So then we actually, like, finally we are actually working today with CNN. It's actually called as convolutional neural networks, to converge and optimize and kind of stuff. And even to the next level, we also use some kind of, generative adversarial networks to eliminate who cannot supply. It was a lot of trial and error. But because of this effort through the marketplace, what we could now connect is, like, one is on the supply side, aggregation, anticipation, and aggregation, and other side, looking at the demand, dynamically aggregate the supplies, so that, like, there is a good enough platform set up for the negotiations, and for taking the trade forward without much of traders and, like, intermediaries in between. In fact, this is what is happening in the today's, like, the trading and intermediaries thing. Like, they kind of have the knowledge about the supply, they have the understanding about the trader, and they try to match. And matching this using the AI is what we are trying to do in the output marketplace. And this is definitely helping a lot in the farmers. And another thing I would want to just touch base slightly is, in outputs particularly, we work extensively with contract development and analysis. What happens in the agriculture domain, particularly, the disputes are huge, right? Like, and if you analyze these disputes, most of them are from communication issues or assumptions. I mean, like, and I didn't say that, or, like, and I said something else, and I didn't understand it this way. There's a lot of disconnect and assumptions between, like, the trade is evolving, or, like, the terms and conditions are evolving. So we use ML to kind of extract these the terms from negotiations, like, whether they're just spoken, they're not really, like, put in a proper format kind of stuff. So we extract these things and, like, make sure to put it between both the parties, and, like, so they follow it. And we could see that, like, reduction in this disputes and issues with this, like, miscommunications. So, I mean, just to conclude, like, there are many problems we are trying to solve in this agriculture domain, with varying success. Maybe not in the best possible way, but, like, we are able to, like, show results in all three aspects of, like, the core agri services, where information management and, like, the knowledge sharing is happening. And in the inputs, aggregation is happening, and, like, we show great value, and even in the outputs. And definitely there's a lot more room to optimize than going forward. But that's where we are today.
So a lot of stuff that you're doing, Raj, as you said, LinkedIn for farmers, but I think you're doing a lot more than what LinkedIn does for us professionals. As you mentioned, some keywords I've picked up: anticipating and aggregating demands, convergence. ensuring no conflicts happen and things like that. Sort of work that you're doing. Congratulations for that, and I do hope that your solution very quickly scales pan India, and our farmers see a lot more value out of it.
Thank you. Just a quick thought, like the LinkedIn for food, the name was given by Jinesh.
Okay.
He remembers it.
Raj should scale up once I invest. That is how you should say.
Sure.
Since we are deep into tech conversation, Bharti, let me come to you. Okay, so while
Sure.
Raj talked a lot of ML usage that he's doing, your solution brings together edge computing and cloud together, right? So can you elaborate
Right.
on this and the role of AI in same and what future holds for your solution?
Yeah, so we initially took the path of complete digitization. Again, right from digitizing the basic farmer profile, this which the entrepreneur does, to the whole lot of demand estimation and supply estimation and all the linking the different layers of the ecosystem to be able to resolve each other's needs and also to bring in the maximum value to the end user, which is the smallholder farmer. So we put together a lot of solutions around this using AI, and also how is it that we help them to be able to do their crop profiling, crop planning, and the major focus that or the major challenge that we felt was that they still do not have access to the advisory, so they don't know what to grow, when to grow. There are a whole lot of things. Where is the demand heading to now? It's very difficult that 100 farmers within a certain locality are growing the same crop. It's not going to yield them the best. So how is it that they estimate? So we've used a lot of these AI and machine learning things, and then technologies to be able to bring in that kind of a solution to them. And then quickly again we failed, with the basic assumption that probably not everyone is tech savvy, and that's where we probably have to bring in something which is closer to them, which is what is we are talking about, building the rural micro economy using local resources on the ground. And this device, this whole digital kit that we are talking about, comprises of various elements. There are a bunch of mobility devices. Two, there is this edge computing device, which makes it easy for an entrepreneur to use whatever advisory that we are bringing in to be able to reach those remote locations which have low or no internet, or even sometimes electricity, and still we are able to reach the smallholder farmers and bring in whatever the AI and machine learning technologies that we are talking about. How is it that we customize it for those people who can access it more easily? So the edge computing device is what works as like a local Wi-Fi router, and then it's able to disseminate that knowledge to people who have smartphones. For those farmers who do not have access to smartphones, there are these mobility devices that come in as part of the kit, and now they are able to use it for the specific needs, on-demand needs that they have, be it for the training needs or be it for the advisory that we bring in the form of bite-sized nuggets, in form of videos, or in terms of information that we are able to provide to them.
Okay. Great. Raj, let me come back to you. What are your scale-up plans and how do you see consolidation happening?
So we are working in the entire ecosystem, right? So we are scaling up in terms of number of farmers. We are already clocking at close to 4 million of them, and the input to marketplace, we have many input sellers onboarded, and we have close to 50,000 products that are on sale on our input marketplace. And more importantly, we are also scaling up in terms of the white labeling. We see this this farmer education engagement and helping them to reach the marketplaces is not just our problem, but we're a technology provider. But other large corporates are also joining this. For example, IGF Birla uses white label Kalgudi to reach out to their farmers, and in terms of the education, advisories, and that kind of stuff, and they engage with them in their marketplaces, input marketplace. They have a white label input marketplace for them, and they custom farmer engagement also, they do it through our platform. So in the inputs again, like we look at working with the corporates to giving a white label solutions to kind of reach out to the more number of farmers. And coming to the outputs, particularly, what we are doing in terms of the core agri services, where we provide solutions in terms of advisories and question and answers and inputs, we help them to connect. But what actually we do behind the scenes is creating the digital trails. A digital trail of what the farmer is, what he's up to, and what kind of information he's receiving, what questions he's asking and answering, what kind of social behavior they are going through, and what inputs or what farm activities and what crop calendars they're following. All the trail that now we use after anticipating and aggregating the supply, we actually attach this contextual traceability, which is nothing but digital trail of the farmer's activity in the activity of the overall production. That is actually helping us to kind of get into more scale in terms of responding. For example, today we are working with in the large poultry, the breeders and the large poultry farmers, and are planning, and most of them already joined to completely procure their input needs the maize and all these things through the platform. So that one is they avoid the intermediaries and there's a cost advantage, and other is getting this traceability. So all in all these three things, inputs, outputs, and we are scaling up as a overall solution provider and enabling the ecosystem players than competing with anyone.
Okay, great to hear that, Raj. Praveen, since we are on topic of expansion and scale up, while Bharti and Raj, their solution is catering directly to farmers, and that's the scale that they're trying to bring in. Your own solution, the way you are working, I understand, it'll require a lot of scaling up with different government programs, and how do you measure their impact, right? So what challenges you foresee in scaling up your solution, and how are you preparing for the expansion?
Sure. See, our challenges is more in terms of bringing up a single or unified solution, because how we are seeing when we are doing different projects, we kind of get different kind of customization requests or change requests, which deviates our project from the actual product itself. So what we deal is we get that change request very frequently, and they want it on the field next day. So that gives us a limited time of making it like a feature and rolling it out and next version release. So what we do is sometimes patches to the product, so that you are trying to avoid. So it's more in terms of the expanding the product, making it more robust and more configurable. That's where we have the challenges. In terms of the resistance from the ground, we initially had that, but it's now everyone is adopting it. Everyone wants to collect the data on the device rather than on the paper, because it helps them, because they had to come back to the office again and enter on the Excel sheet. Rather, they prefer it on the mobile app, and they upload the data and it comes into the server real time. So our challenge is more not in terms of expanding our business or expanding our client base. It's more in terms of expanding our product, make it more have more templates. When you come, you just plug and play, you just configure it on the fly, you drag and drop which template you want to collect and all that. That's where we have the challenges, but we are solving it step by step, one by one. And I think we will be there, we'll be reaching a place where we can at least get a base product where it's configurable. You don't have to come to us for any customization or anything. So that's where we are planning, and our ideas are going inside here.
Great to hear that. Ram, let me come to you in a broader perspective. Since you work with multiple startups and you see the much broader picture, what are the current challenges in rolling out AI-based solution at a large scale? Is it just data availability, or is there some other systemic issues? And what is being done to address those challenges? So if you can share that with the team.
Sure. Yeah. So it's a combination of both, Deepti. It's not just database challenges. I think there are some systemic challenges, right? And also, I think the problem is slightly more nuanced. Give you an example. If somebody is trying to create an AI-based solution, say for crop diagnostics, right? So we have a startup called SenseAcre. They are into drone-based crop diagnostics, right? For them, the challenge is, I think we lost Deepti. Yeah, okay, she's back. I thought we lost you for a minute. So yeah, So some challenges are such that you need a lot more scientific collaboration that needs to happen. Like especially, like as I was saying, there is a lot of talk and a lot of lot of movement around use of drones, right? But drone-based imagery also requires a lot of scientific backstopping that really needs to be backed in that product, right? So for in those kinds of situations, the challenge is not just about availability of data, but the challenge is how do you engage with the scientific community at large, and how do you create solutions that are in alignment with the local state agriculture university, or are aligned with compliances, right? Vis-a-vis, if you move into slightly different realms, take for the case of fintech, right? Today you have, for instance, SatSure has a solution around estimating crop damage, right? But is it still accepted by the industry? Can it straight away replace the crop cutting experiments? I think we still have those challenges there, right? So I mean, there is a huge promise, no doubt about it, but having said that, I think there are a number of pain points that we need to kind of address.
So great for that. Yeah, I mean, that overall acceptance and more, it's a lot more than just data availability. Yes, data availability itself is a challenge. And in my personal experience, what I've also been observing working with a lot of state governments and agri-tech is the data being in silos and people not understanding, accepting that what needs to can be put in open source in a consumable format.
Sure.
The overall that mindset of I own the data. So yeah, there are two different aspects to it. One from the input side itself, that how do you get all the data and acceptance. Second, as you
Absolutely.
said, the output side of it, that acceptance by industry and by
Absolutely.
government solutions.
Yeah.
So I think two different sets of problems that really need to be addressed for adopting on this. Jinesh, I'll come to you, and it's literally $1 million question. Okay, we have discussed on how technology and adoption challenges are. So the $1 million question now is, as a VC, what do you look for in a startup while making investment decisions? What advice would you give to startups who want to solve large scale impact areas such as agriculture?
Sure. I mean, this is a question which every VC answers in every panel. So I think it's absolutely right. Look, the advice to is like, as a VC, we are like typical VCs trying to figure out how do we invest in entrepreneurs who can solve a large problem. I mean, are they thinking in the right direction? Are they working together, or they just is some idea, right? Because ultimately, at the end of the day, VC investment is all about backing the right team. So if you got the right team with you, I think that's the first thing what a VC looks about it. It shouldn't be a solo founder with a bright idea but nothing on the ground. That really doesn't excite if you're a first-time entrepreneur. If you have been successful entrepreneur in the previous past, then yes, it's a different discussion. Second thing what we look is are you solving a genuine large problem and a problem which can be solved, right? I mean, in case of agriculture, we are trying to solve existing problems. We are not trying to solve a futuristic problem of agriculture, because that's something which other tech VCs can think about, solving some convenience problem of a person who is already very happy in life. In case of farming and agriculture, it's not the case. The problems are very big. I mean, we are looking at crisis in terms of ecological crisis, in terms of climate change, water table dropping down, soil is a big concern. So are you solving a big problem? And what we look is, are you solving a problem which can be solved out? Like someone is trying to say, I want to start growing something in Mars. So we are not the VCs who can do right now. But so that's what we look about it. And we look about, and the other piece of the question you asked, that what advice would we give to startups to solve large impact problems? I mean, the most important advice is that we ask the entrepreneurs whether the heart is in the right place, right? It's very good to say you are an impact investor or impact entrepreneur, and you get tired in 5 years. I mean, if you're trying to solve a problem in agriculture, you're putting your life in the sector. It cannot be solved in 5 years, 6 years, because the problem we are facing is multi-decadal, multi-centuries. And I know for Raj, at least from last 8, 9, 10 years, doing the same thing. If he had said he's going to get tired in 5 years, I think his company would be going nowhere, right? Same applies to Bharti or Praveen. So you need to understand that if you want to solve an impact problem, whether it's education, health, healthcare, or agriculture, these are non-glamorous areas, right? These are sectors, these are the focus areas which requires to work with millions and millions of people who are not so rich, and it's a difficult job, right? I mean, that's what we advise. So if your heart is in the right place, then you go about it. And case of agriculture, I mean, if you're trying to solve a problem, try to focus on the farmer, right? I mean, don't come with a utopian solution, say I'm going to look from satellite and give you answer and not knowing what farmer needs it. If any of the solution what you're providing and the connect is not with the farmers or with the growers or anyone in the value chain, it's not going to work out. Also understand the fact that we are solving problems for 130 million farmers, smallholder farmers, who don't have the ability to pay money like a Western European farmer or a US farmer. We are looking for farmers whose per capita income is like $2,000 on average at the best case scenario, right? So can you make them solutions for those farmers? Can it really scale, and can it really be replicated to millions and millions of farmers? So that's what we look, right? So that's something which we advise entrepreneurs, saying that guys, look at these areas and then decide to come, because once you decide to come, agriculture is a nightmare, right? It's not, you have problems of climate, you have problems of weather, you have problems of pest, and in spite of you doing everything right, still government could say, okay, I'll stop exports of your produce, right? I mean, right now, for once the onion farmers are making money, government decided, okay, we will stop the exports, and that's how life is. So are you willing to take all these complications? If yes, then I think you should focus on solving large impact problems, I mean, like agriculture.
So Jinesh, if I may summarize what you said, startups who are wanting to get into agriculture space, what you would look for, one is, yes, experience with entrepreneurship. Second is, are you trying to solve a solvable problem? Because if it's too big a problem, then you won't achieve. Third, is your heart in place and are you in it for long term? And fourth, if I may use the term that we commonly use, customer centricity. With farmer or the supply chain being as your end customer, are you really working backwards from that perspective and solving their problem? So I hope my summary is correct, Jinesh, right? That these are the 4 key that you look for, right? Now, before we take questions coming in from audience, as a rapid fire round, I'll pose one question and each of the panelists, if you can just answer in one question, just in one sentence. The first question to all of you is, how do you see future of digital agriculture? Bharti, I'll start with you. Future of digital agriculture in one line.
I think the future is now. So it's just the integration of this various point solutions that each of us is bringing together. If there's an integration, I think that's what is going to drive the digital agriculture future.
Jinesh?
I mean, we think digitization future for digital agriculture is I don't think we're talking about future, we're talking of now, right? Like what Bharti said. I mean, if we are not able to get everything right today, for the first time, we got the cheap data, we got smartphones, smart featured phones across every farmer, and for once, COVID allowed and forced every farmer to start becoming more and more digital savvy. So I think we think the future is going to get better and better from what it is today. So I don't see any problem there.
Praveen?
Mute.
Praveen, you're on mute.
You're on mute, Praveen.
Sorry for that. So I'll liberally take the Microsoft argument on that, the trust over the intelligence. Like I would say, like if we can build the trust on the data or the digital platforms, then I think it's more better than we have the AI and everything. That's where I think it should be here.
Raj?
To me, AI is the only way. I mean, it's not about the future when it is going to be. It's the only way to extract this, the gigantic proportions of traditional operational intelligence or wisdom, you might want to call it, and extract all this and put it to use in the digital agriculture. There is no other way. That's the future to me.
Ram?
Yeah, I think it's not a question of whether, it's only a question of when. So I think digital in agriculture is definitely out there. Having said that, again, I touch back on Jinesh's point. I like this famous quote from Yuri Levine where he said, fall in love with the problem, not the solution. I think somewhere I kind of sense that tendency when technocrats enter agriculture, there is a tendency to to focus too much on the solution and try to force that on farmers. It's got to be the other way around. I'd like to summarize by saying that the trailer looks great, but somebody has to make the picture also very grand and make it really work, right? I think that would be my last statement.
Very well said. And there's one last question that I'll pose to to each of you before we go to audience questions. And meanwhile, I'll request audience to keep putting in their questions. I already see a couple of questions coming in. So again, to each of the panelists, one advice that you would give to agri startups to scale up their business. Bharti, we start with you again.
I think your customer centricity is most important. Like again, Jinesh and Ram said, you can't be building solutions that ultimately the farmers cannot access or the farmers cannot afford. So customer centricity is the most important. With all the efforts that we are putting in has to be towards the smallholder farmer.
Jinesh,
I think I agree with Bharti. Focus on customers / farmers who are going to be your main stakeholders, but use technology to the extent possible so as to scale up fast. Without technology, I don't think we can scale up and create large companies.
Praveen?
Yeah, I may repeat it. Basically, we need to build the trust on the data we are delivering or the insights we are giving to the customers or the project owners. Like they need to believe that this is the right data. That's where I think the startup should focus on. Yeah.
Raj?
I would suggest to look at large scale problems that actually require simple AI solutions. Focus more on the domain, customer, and the engineering, feature engineering, if you would call it, required at the domain level than what Jinesh was alluring at, the fancy application of complex solutions which are actually solving lifestyle or a convenience kind of problems.
Perfect. Ram?
While agreeing with what all the panelists have said, my specific point would be identify the right entry points, because I think agriculture is one sector where there is a huge presence of government, there is a lot of informal activity, there's a lot of research and development activity. Based on the solution and based on what you're offering is, I think identifying the right entry points, can make the difference between upscaling and having a great solution but still not going anywhere.
Great. So if I may summarize, the 2 rounds of rapid questions, the theme that we see emerging is focus on customer, focus on farmers, focus on problem and not the solution, not on the what you have in your truck, but what the farmer or the customer really needs. Focus on that. And as Praveen has been saying, make sure people trust your data and how you're able to convert that to intelligence. Now let me start moving to the audience questions. We have quite a few coming in. Let's see how many we can take. So before I start, passing on the questions to the panelists, there's one person who has asked that you would like to get connected to each of the panelists. So my suggestion would be, you'll be able to find details of all the panelists on LinkedIn. T-Hub has tagged all the panelists on LinkedIn, so you can reach out on that. Or also, T-Hub will continue to have a recorded version of this playing. So again, contact details or LinkedIn profile of all the panelists will be available from there. Jinesh, let me pass on the first question to you. Okay. The question is, how affordable is agri-tech to a farmer now, and how do you see this in future, next 5 to 10 years?
Look, I think, if I take a look at affordability, I look in the cost aspect, right? If I take a look at agriculture in the last few years, we have seen rainy days are very less. We have a spurt of rains coming in, then there is a significant dry period, again rains coming in. So climate's becoming uncertain. We have issues about labor costs going up because no one wants to remain in agriculture. Everyone wants to move to urban area or do something beyond agriculture because agriculture is a tough job. Third issue is that you have issues about complete uncertainties around things, and we don't have a lot of control whether you're a farmer or customer. So these are the costs what you have it. Solutions today are in terms of getting more information, getting data, like what Praveen mentioned, you need to get more data. And that might be slightly costly if you're just looking at a holistic, say what's the cost, but if you compare with the vis-a-vis the implications, it might not be costly. Other thing like farmers not taking crop insurance, right? what we're going to say is 5% or 6% of the revenues of the farm, right? But if you lose out, you're losing out the entire crop, and then you cry and hope the government gives to you. So we think the tech solutions, what are being done today and what are going to come, I think we will see a significant reduction of cost anyways, right? The hardware cost, the software cost will keep on dropping every year. And with the smart feature phones getting available in everyone's hand, I think the cost of digitization, cost of getting data is going to go down. Even today, if you are able to optimize your efficiencies and make more money, I think cost really doesn't matter, right? I mean, a tractor costs like 6 to 7 lakh rupees, but farmers have been buying. Right? They've been machines are being used. It costs a couple of lakhs, but they've been buying because they need to do time and there is no labor available. Right? You are doing fumigation, you are putting input technology. Same is going to be with the traditional precision agriculture technique, whether it's hardware, software. You will need that to get it right. I mean, if you want to understand measure weather, you want to understand soil quality, you want to understand what is the salinity levels of your crop, I mean, of the soil or the water, you will have to understand, read, get the information. For that you have to spend on technology. But if you don't do it, I mean, you're going to lose everything. So I would not worry about the cost per se right now, because if you're not doing it, you will lose money. But on a general basis, the cost of technology keeps coming down every year. I mean, I'm sure you can ask every entrepreneur, the cost keeps on coming down. Whether they pass on to the farmers or not, or the customer, is a different discussion.
Raj, there is one question specifically meant for you. So the question is, can you elaborate on how, number one, you create confidence amongst buyers and suppliers about the transaction on the output side? So yeah, that's one question for you.
Sure. The confidence or the trust, you might want to call it, right? Like, so is currently, like, how is this it, like, somebody knows someone, and like, that's how, like, the confidence is there. With us, the confidence starts from, like, one is the digitization, where the profiles are actually queued and, like, verified with respect to, let's say, their GSTs and that kind of stuff, and profiles are online. And also their activity also is showcased in terms of whether they are actually logging in or whether they are actually sharing some things and that kind of stuff. That gives us some kind of social comfort that, like, these people are real, to some extent. And the next level of, like, the confidence in terms of, like, something looking at is the transparency in terms of and also the traceability, which is actually contextual and which is not actually created, rather it is generated. What do I mean is that, like, it's not like, that I go, the buyer or a seller, like, going online and, like, entering few things and getting, oh, give me a trace of this and attaching a document. That's not what it is. This transparency and the traceability is actually a digital trail of their activity, which is tamper-proof in terms of nobody can go back in time and change it. And does it mean it can't be spoofed? It potentially can be, but, like, it can be spoofed only once, because, like, we can't go back and change to meet to somebody, some other. Last but not least, we also keep creating
Lost.
Yeah. I think we lost Raj's connection.
We can move to the next question.
Yeah, we'll go to the next question. Next question. So Raj, we had lost you in between for a couple of seconds. So you may just want to repeat your last point.
Last point was, yeah, we measured something called a trust rank internally, which is actually measured based on their network and also, like, their activity on the platform, which actually gives that, like, more better trust. And we don't allow any kind of advertisements, which is actually, like, disconnects the people from, like, that comfort and the trust.
Okay, Ram, I'll pass on the next question to you. Okay, so the next question is, agri-tech brings a lot of changes in upcoming years, but how do you make it successful in reality? Because more than 50% farmers are not educated or they don't know how to use technology.
Sure, I think that's a good question. Having said that, as I said, sometimes users of your technology and beneficiaries could be two different people here, right? So for instance, users could be like what Kusa is doing, right? You are creating a new cadre who are serviced through digital technologies, but the ultimate beneficiaries could be the farmers, right? So that's kind of a workaround when you are kind of faced with a situation where you have a large population of digitally challenged farmers. But having said that, let me also kind of pose a counter question. You see, the same farmers whom we are claiming are digitally illiterate, the same farmers are today buying phones, are using it for their own communication purposes, right? So probably I think we as a community need to flip the question, right? Why is it that we are ending up creating services which are probably inaccessible to farmers, right? So probably a lot of innovation, lot of reflection that's needed on our part. Again, it kind of boils down to this question of customer centricity. Are we understanding the customer and his or her pain points enough, and thereby creating a solution which will be much more readily lapped by the end user?
Okay. Since we are reaching,
I want to
sorry,
add to
Dinesh,
one
you're
thing. I mean, someone said that farmers are illiterate, right? I mean, I don't understand the language. Maybe they might not understand the digital technology, but
Yeah.
farmer does understand business. They understand technology for sure. Indian farmers have adopted BT cotton technology fastest in the world, right? The US took 30-40 years. India did in 7 years. So it's not that farmers don't understand technology. Farmers are using WhatsApp. They're buying everything online.
Correct.
Question, are we making technology available to them at the right price point, and are we making it in the right manner? And also making a presumption that farmers are illiterate or they don't understand, I think is also something we need to change ourselves.
Totally agree. And now we'll take the last question, and I'll follow Raj's model of aggregating and doing that. So the couple of questions on drones. So Jinesh, I'll pass that on to you. So how do you see future of drones happening in agriculture, and with regulatory requirement, adoption, cost, all those aspects? How do you see that happening?
Look, I mean, I would add robotics, just not drones, because drones means only flying machines. Look, I think it could also be possible that India might just have a land-based robots also equally capable to do it, right? I think personally on our basis, we think flying drones is not a great way of doing business in India, because our farm sizes are smaller, and if you end up spraying in some other's farm, it could really have a problem, legal problems. So my gut is saying that in next 5 years we'll have more land-based robots doing the job of what a farmer is doing today, but with the help of a joystick or some kind of a remote sensing technology. But the future is there for sure, right? And if you remove the flying part of it and make it walking on the land, then I think government has no concern.
Wow.
So
Yeah.
we just have to figure something out.
Yeah, so that's a great insight for a lot of startups who might be in hardware space as well, right? Look at robotics for farming. With that, we have come to end of the session. Thanks so much to the panelists for the very insightful discussion that we had, and I hope audience enjoyed it as much. Thanks to audience for participating, for being there and listening to us. Last request to you all would be, audience, is that please do give your valuable feedback on how you like this particular session when you log out or when you receive the feedback form. We very much appreciate your feedback, and that will help us improvise the next session, next planning that we'll do around this theme. Thank you so much, everyone, for being here, for making time for this session.
Thank you, everyone.
Bye.
Yeah, bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.